name is Gary Royal. I live in San Francisco, California, and my bike this year is a 1945 Knucklehead drag-inspired chopper. This year I just wanted to chrome everything I could. I wanted to make a full show and go bike. I chromed, there's a spot in, I live in San Francisco, but just down the way in Fresno, California, there's a chrome shop called Milanowski Polishing. They do chrome there. They've chromed the last 3 years for me, but this year, if it was metal, I wanted to chrome it. So I chromed every single piece, the cases, transmission, front end, every single thing. If it wasn't chromed, I painted it, yeah. So, I mean, everything changes once it's chromed, you know, the shape, everything doesn't fit as well. I did send everything, the whole engine to chrome, and my buddy Jeff Montgomery down in Hanford, he built the motor. So he did tell me he spent a couple of days just chasing fucking threads and races and all that stuff, trying to clean it all up just to assemble it back together. You know, not anybody would ever want to chrome a case. It's pretty hard, especially metal from what, 80, 90 years ago, 1945. So it was a chore, man, but the juice was worth the squeeze. You know, it came out really nice, and it's never going to be dull like, you know, polished aluminum. So yeah, I'm excited. It looks good. I'm happy with it. I did most of the fabrication. I had a buddy help me on like the hard stuff or the fine, you know, finishing work, but all the frame I molded, metal fabbed, and painted it. I did all the Bondo. That's kind of like, being a tattooer, that's kind of where it got me into that kind of stuff on bikes. You know, I was like, I like the paints, you know, the colors and all that shit. So being able to paint it is like a real time saver too. So I'm waiting on nobody. So I was able to build the bike in 3 months just because I am in charge of most of it, you know. I wasn't waiting on anybody really other than the chrome guy. But he was quick too, because I've used him for the last 3 years. So he just knows my urgency and what I'm doing. So yeah, it was a 3-week turnaround on the chrome. So yeah, it was good. Nice and easy. I mean, obviously I'm self-employed, I'm a tattoo artist. I own my own little shop. So every year I just kind of set up, I said, okay, I'm gonna tattoo on the weekends, and Monday through Friday, I'm gonna work on the bike. So, you know, I treat it as like a regular 9 to 5. I wake up early in the morning, eat breakfast, go down to the garage. It's underneath my house, you know, San Francisco style. So, and I just get after it. I work on what I work on, you know, hang out with the dog during the day. I'm always home, and then, yeah, just make money on the weekends. It's kind of a vicious cycle. To make the money, put it right into the bike, you know, and that's kind of how it went. And if I run short, I just sell something or sell a bike or, you know, work a little, pick up an extra couple tattoos. But I do paint for other people, and I do stuff, but like when it's show bike time, which is the last 3 years, I really cut out everybody else. I just kind of work for myself and do my own thing. I kind of do them fast. I did this one in 3 months, 3-4 months, but it's just one of those things that's like, when I'm on, I'm on. And I like, instead of doing a little bit, doing something else, I just like to just be all in and just like, okay, this month I'm gonna be painting it and molding it, you know? So I really kind of structure and since I did it the last 3 years, I have my phone, and I can look back and go, okay, so last year I was painting at this time, you know? Or like I had the chrome done. So I have a kind of a timeline, like outline, already kind of set up, so I knew if I'm either behind or ahead, so it kind of works out well. It's always stressful. You know, you want to act like you got white gloves on, putting it together. I mean, you can throw parts from a swap meet together, you can throw a bike together in a couple days, you know, that's easy when you're welding, cutting, shit like that, but when everything has to be perfectly fine-tuned, you know, you have to chase all the threads from the paint, you know, perfect chrome, so it's always a little hectic. It's very, very stressful. That's kind of where it gets a little bit like, you know, I like to be alone when I do it too. I don't like anybody helping. I want to make sure everything's tight, everything's where it needs to be. You know, if something gets scratched, I want it to be on me. So that's the hardest part, is just the assembly, you know. It did take me a few days to do it, you know, because I was being thorough, you know, especially with the wiring. I wanted to make sure, 'cause it's all hidden, I wanted to make sure that was done right and well. So I think I spent a whole day just running 5 wires, you know. It's just one of those things that you really just take your time, because you want it to go together at one time and be done. You know, it's not like you're gonna be swapping shit around. So shut everybody out, turned my phone on do not disturb, and just kind of got after it, and then, you know, emerged when it was done. So the tank inspiration was based off of this old Midwest bike this dude Tiny built. I think it was an Alfostero. It was a yellow Panhead with the drag tanks, and I really liked the simplicity of it, but this one I wanted to make it look a little bit more like in the bike, you know. So molding the scoops, I came up with this idea just like kind of sketching, you know. I do like the scoops. I do that on most bikes, you know. Everything's always got to have a little mold, like the Mark Drew style kind of scooping and stuff. I had it on paper, but it was just really kind of a headache just try to figure out how to actually do it. sitting around and drawing and kind of like playing with cardboard and stuff like that, I kind of managed to figure it out. And I knew I wanted to do the crazy filler caps. I just like that really 60s wild style look. You know, I just made sure to like make sure everything flows well, you know, and look like it's not an afterthought. You know, like bolting the tank on just straight up kind of looks a little like, I don't know, like afterthought to me. So if it's scooped in and it sits in the frame, it looks like it's meant to be that way, and it's like, and it flows well. So that's kind of where I was at with that, yeah. So first I cut the country bar out, and I was like, this would be cool. And then the tanks were so small, and there was such a big gap between the motor and the frame, it looked kind of empty. And I don't know where I got the idea to do the double country bar. It was just one of those things that I just thought it'd be cool. And you know, I was like, well, 2 tanks, 2 country bars. So I went with this theme, and until I ruined it with the 3 pipes. But yeah, no, it was a cool idea. And I've never seen it before, so just trying to do these little details, and structurally it's probably better for the bike, you know? It's hard to one-up myself just because every year I think I did the best I could do, you know? I'm like, I pushed it to the limit. I tried to be as original as possible, being, you know, even though this stuff was cool in the 60s. So it's like, there's many years of everybody doing this kind of stuff. So it's hard to kind of be unique and kind of one of a kind, which is, you know, not everything has to be that way, but yeah, I just kind of take what I did last year and I just try to one up it. I try to do a little bit better. A lot of the designs on this new bike were ones that I didn't put into the blue bike from last year, you know. There's a couple of things where I was like, I should do this or this, and I went with this. So this bike is this bike this year is more of a different version of last year, you know. It's like not fire and ice, kind of ended up that way, but you know, so I just wanted to simulate or ride off, you know, just kind of like mirror that bike and just do it a little bit different each way and keep it the same stance and style. So the story on the oil bag is there was an old Survivor up in Northern California, out kind of by the Sierras, that a buddy of mine bought, and it was an old, yeah, it's like a cylinder tank, and each individual fin was welded on. So I actually traded the guy for the bike. I took the oil bag off it and sold the bike, and then we ended up cutting the top and the bottom off, lowering it a little bit, new filler cap, and we kind of redid it. Pretty much, we could have built it from scratch, but we just pretty much just redid it all. And I really liked it because the fins on it matched the jugs of the cylinders, and like it fits kind of that 60s wild style kind of spacey look. And yeah, I'm stoked on it. It's kind of one of my favorite things. I can't say I did it, but I'm glad I brought it back, you know, gave it another life. When I was done, I kind of pulled it off the lift, brought it out into the sun, because I'm like building a little car garage, you know, so I don't really have a good angle to look at it. It's always like cramped in there. I've got a bunch of bikes. I'm working all over myself. Just pulling it out, I like, you know, I had a little emotional thing. I set it out and I just looked at it and I was just like, fuck, that's cool. You know, I don't know, it's just one of those things. It's like the big reveal. Once you put it on its own weight, on a kickstand, and you stand back and look at it in the sun and actually see how the paint like sparkled, because, you know, there's a lot of pearls in there, candies, and so yeah, it was just really real to see it out there. Yeah, I mean, Jeff Montgomery, he helped me with the motor. Insane builder. He's out of Hanford, California. I mean, Morenos, they obviously chromed everything for me. They crushed it every single time. Brent Wallace, he's a fabricator out of Berkeley. He's an old hot rod guy, into all the crazy ideas. He's down to help me with anything I need. I actually did a one-day mission down to get the bike pinstriped. You know, I dabble in the pinstripe. I know how to do it a little bit, but I'm not near you know, can do a show bike. So I actually did a one-day turnaround, drove down, had Pac-Man paints. He pinstriped it for me, nailed it. It's kind of the icing on the cake kind of thing, especially for that era. And then drove back, and yeah, that was kind of like the biggest. That was probably the highlight, you know, having him pinstriping and knowing that it's like it was complete, because that was the last piece of the puzzle. So I shout out to all my buddies in Sunset that didn't come by and annoy me while I was doing it, you know. Yeah. And my baby girl Tay Tay, thank you so much for putting up with me and my hot head. You know, she saw the highs and the lows of it. My name's Gary Royal, San Francisco, California. I have Beware Choppers, which is my little bike thing, and Beware Tattoo, and that's in the Sunset in San Francisco, California. You can find me on Instagram under Gary Royal Tattoo and Beware_Choppers.
This recap video is brought to you by Throttle Addiction. With thousands of chopper parts, a 90-day return policy, and free shipping on orders over $100, throttleaddiction.com is the best place to build your dream bike. Check out their selection of custom handlebars, fuel tanks, made in the USA hardtails, and so much more. For more than a decade, Throttle Addiction has been manufacturing and selling the best custom parts on the market. Build, customize, and ride. throttleaddiction.com.
My name's Sean Jackson. I'm from Springboro, Pennsylvania, and my bike is a 1926 board track racer, custom. We built the whole engine. So board trackers are a big passion of mine. I actually run a company called Competition Distributing out of my shop. We specialize in 1910 and 1936 Harley Davidson parts mainly, Flying Merkle, Excelsior, all those kind of Henderson. But board tracking has always been a love of mine ever since I was a little kid. It's just like, to me, it's like that first era of performance, and a lot of the things we have today are because of board track racing and factory racing in general. So that's kind of my forte. And I built a few custom bikes now, and this one I wanted to try to keep it as much in our wheelhouse as we could and kind of show people what our capabilities are, especially with the old stuff. So this bike here in particular, I built this for racing. We race 3 times a year. 2 times in New Smyrna and 1 time in Hohenwald, Tennessee every year during Memorial Day. And it's Sons of Speed. Billy Lane holds the event, and it's all antique motorcycle racing. So we actually go out with 100-year-old bikes. We race in the board track classes, and myself, my partner Tom, and our team, we go out with anywhere from 4 to 5 bikes, and we race everybody else in our industry that does this antique stuff. And it's probably the best time on the planet, because there's no other place you could go to watch 100-year-old board track bikes race like they did back in the teens and stuff. So we only run about 6 laps per heat, but we don't have any brakes. So we're all out there running, and these twins, like the bike that I built here, this bike's definitely capable of 100 miles an hour. So when you're out there running, you don't have any brakes, and nobody around you has brakes either. So you have to go into the turns, and you're racing on these big banked ovals. You have to go into the turn and know when to let off and then when to get back on, because there's you can't change gears or anything. It's one speed. So like this bike in particular, we'll lock it in 3rd gear, high gear, and just push, start, go. And once you're out there running, that's it. There's no shifting, no brakes or anything. So you really have to be able to judge when to let off the throttle, what your guy's doing when you're racing side by side with somebody. And there's times you get close enough you can touch bars, and you guys are all going the same speed and no brakes. So it gets kind of sketchy for sure, but it's a lot of fun. I wouldn't trade it for anything. The heads on that bike, we made the heads, and they have 2 exhausts for the front and 2 exhausts for the rear heads. And they're modeled off of a 1928 Rudge overhead valve engine. Rudge was a fierce competitor back in the 20s, 30s, and into the 40s before they finally shut down. One of the performance mods of the day was taking a Rudge single-cylinder head and mating it to a Harley JD engine, a platform of a Harley, and making a road racer out of it. And to my knowledge, I think there's only one other guy that's done it. He's over in Europe, and he made a really heck of a fast road racer. And we kind of wanted to pay homage to that whole performance era and that game. We did a little bit of a flip on it. We made ours out of aluminum, kept all the other things there, such as the dual ports. And what they did back in the day is they thought that the dual ports per head was a quicker way to evacuate the exhaust, because they wanted to keep temperatures down on everything, because temperature was a big issue back in the early cast iron days and performance and stuff. Yeah, so that was the first time I've actually ever supercharged anything, so I was really nervous about that. But it ended up working out pretty good. We fired it up with the motor, broke it in, and it worked really well. Got it tuned in, and then I put the supercharger on after the fact that we had the motor broke in, so we knew that the motor would run, so that helped out quite a bit. But once we added it on there and got the drive all set up, we made a draw-through style, so the carburetor's the first thing, and it pulls the air through the carburetor into the supercharger, into the engine. So it didn't really require too much tuning. It was just more of adding fuel, because obviously we added so much more air. So it worked out really well. I was happy. The supercharger is one of the few things that we actually bought for the bike that we didn't make, and that was, I got it from a Subaru car off of eBay actually, because I wanted to find something as small as possible. That engine being as old as it is, the cases, they're not really meant to run with boost, so I didn't want to add a ton of boost to it, so we got a really small AMR style 300 Japanese ACEN supercharger, and then we actually underdrove it with a gear ratio. My buddy Kevin that helped me build the bike, he came up with the calculations for it, but we did a 0.81 to 1 ratio. So while the motor's spinning, it's actually relatively low boost, so we don't overdo it on the engine. There were so many components on the engine that we made. All we started with was just the cases. Everything else, the gear chests, the cylinders, the heads, the push rods, the rockers, the valves, the springs, literally everything on that engine we made. So it was extremely stressful because obviously with Born Free you have a deadline. So there were some times I was questioning if this was the right bike to be building for a deadline show, but it worked out pretty well. In the long run, obviously it ran really well, but that was definitely the most challenging for us to put that together. Total loss engine, total loss oil system, which is accustomed to that year of bike. All of the bikes that we work on primarily with our company are all total loss engines, and that's what Harley ran all the way up until 1936. And how that works is you don't have a recirculating oil pump. So a lot of times your left side tank would be your oil tank, and then your right side tank would be your fuel. And what that means is you have to fill your engine cases every time you ride that bike. So the best practice to get into and how we do it with all of our JDs and VLs and stuff like that in the early bikes is you manually pump 4 ounces into the gear chest on your cases, and that 4 ounces will keep your bike running. So you want to try to maintain that level of 4 ounces the entire time you're riding down the road. So whether you're going 10 miles, 50 miles, 70 miles, and there's some different ways to go about it. But they all have a hand plunger, and I built my own hand plunger system for this bike, and you can actually manually see how much oil you're putting in. You pump in your 4 ounces, and then you go up to your front and you turn on a drip system because I eliminated the oil pump. The oil pump that came on those older bikes, they started in 1915. What it would do is as you would give the bike gas, it would take more oil out of your tank and throw it into your chest, so that when you're consuming more and it goes out your breather onto your chain, it doesn't ever come back. So as you're riding down the road, your oil level is lowering. So no matter what you do, you always have to make sure you're at that 4 ounce mark. You don't want to go too much, because if you run too much, you're going to lose a lot of power and you can glaze your cylinders over time. And if you have too little, obviously that's really bad too, because you're going to probably blow your motor up. So that's, it's the same exact system that Harley's always ran. We just added a little bit of a flair to it. Every time I go to do a build, I always try to push myself a little bit further and further. I don't want to ever be comfortable with what I'm doing, because the way I look at it is if it's in your comfort zone, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. And I not to sound cheesy, but that's just like kind of what drives me to build the next bike. So with this bike, I set out to build as physically as much as we could, and we did a pretty good job of it. And at the end of the day, it's really nice because you can actually look at that and say, hey, I made all that. Instead of like, oh, I bought this and bolted this on or whatever, and it's just a thing for me, and I'm not trying to take away from anybody or anything like that, but it's just something I kind of take pride in, hand making stuff like the old timers, because back in the 20s and the teens, they didn't have parts, so they had to make them. So I just try to follow that path as best I can. I think my favorite part of the whole build was getting to work with all my buddies. Kevin O'Neill, huge hand. I couldn't do any of this without him. My buddy Brian O'Neill, which is Kevin's brother, he does all my paint work. Phenomenal painter. I don't have anybody else paint my bikes. My buddy Mike Silvio helped us put the motor together, built the engine for us. He's a great guy, great guy. Couldn't ask for a better friend. Tom Banks, who was my partner with my business and one of my best friends. I couldn't do any of this without him. He gave me a chance in life to do this kind of stuff full time, and I owe him everything for that. My wife Kelsey, putting up with all my stress and late nights and deadlines and stuff like that. Having that support, it's not possible to do this without support. So Gary Ellis helps me with machine work, does a lot of our machine work. He's a great guy. Love Gary. And then last but not least, George Banks. He does my transmission stuff for me, builds my transmissions, and George, again, can't do any of this without those guys, so I appreciate all of them, and wouldn't do it with anybody else. Competition distributing, that's our business. You can find us at competitiondist.com, dist.com. We deal in primarily 1910 and 1936 Harley Davidson, Flying Merkle, all those old school parts. And then obviously we can transition to newer bikes too. But yeah, that antique bikes is our game. We do a lot of cross country events, racing, Sons of Speed, all that good stuff. But you can check us out, Instagram, Competition Distributing. We're on there, and then obviously our website. My name is Sean Jackson. I'm from Springboro, Pennsylvania, and on my Instagram is Action88Jackson.
Hi, I'm Chris Milanowski. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I built a 1948 WR KR for Born Free 15. Yeah, I picked up pretty much a pile of parts of an old WR lower end with a KR top end that it looked like somebody had tried getting together at one point. We had the cylinders nickel plated. The electroless nickel plating works a lot like chroming. You got to have a polished surface initially if you want a shiny finish, but also it's forgiving to wear. A lot of the hardware on my bike is bead blasted and just plated with the rough finish. So it gives you a different visual, but it's the same coating. The frame is actually a hand-built frame that I built out of chromoly tubing. I had every part polished before welding together, and once it was done, I had it nickel plated as well. The C-post casting is 3D printed steel. Redid the rear end to bring it in a little tighter and sleeker to give it a better finish. Lower end has a WAGON front mount mag that mounts off where a generator would normally sit, and the cam chest cover has a peekaboo timing cover that the factory used for 1 or 2 years only, and normally there'd be an aluminum cover over it. Well, I decided it'd be cool to expose that vernier gear with an acrylic cover so you can kind of see it. It's just a cool little detail. The clutch cable on the bike is actually a stock piece. I've been asked a lot about that because of how utilitarian it must look or something. So the risers I made with the lathe and a mill to get to be one piece, and then I went to my friend Bobby Goodtimes' shop in Chicago and we ended up bending the handlebars. We bent one side, slid the risers on from the other, bent up the other side, and then silver soldered the risers in place. Silver soldering is like sweating or brazing pipe, just like you do copper pipe, but you're using a little stronger material. And it's been used in motorcycle building and manufacturing for the last 100 years. It allows you to have smaller fillets and it makes it look a lot cleaner. Instead of having to dress a weld, you got a soldered seam that needs very minimal finishing. The C-post casting was 3D printed. It was drawn up in a computer program. I had a little help from a good friend on that one too, and we inset a little monogram of myself, changed the geometry of the frame a little bit in the back, and you make a computer model of what you want, and then you actually just send that right to the 3D printing machine, and it laser sinters powder layer by layer to create the shape that you want. There's no mold, there's no casting. It comes out of the machine done. And once it's done, you might have to do some finished machining or polishing afterwards to get your tubes to fit in or get something to bolt up to whatever you need. Same thing with the triple trees. Those were computer modeled and then machined out of solid 70-75 billets. And they were finished with a little bit of sanding, some aluminum oxide blasting with a glass bead top coat on. I like using modern technology in a way that you would never suspect. When I was 16, I started in a production machine shop, learning to make repetitive parts over and over precisely. And I think that's where a lot of my attention to detail comes from, having to make things right. I try to do that with everything that I make. I like making things to look like you would buy it off a shelf. There's a level of quality in products that you buy, and I like to incorporate that in anything that I build or make. The fork lowers are Barney style that I make myself. I take chromoly tubing, I machine the bottoms for it to accept the original 33.4 dampeners. I press in bronze bushings and then hone them to size. And I also put a seal on the top of them. And I've put them on the last 3 bikes that I've built. I kind of like the style, of the cleanliness, the axle's fully encapsulated, and it just makes for a seamless, clean design. So the exhaust on the bike was flame bent titanium tubing. So we sand filled it and made a pattern out of a brake line actually and just bent it to the shape that we wanted to really complement the lines of the bikes and the traditional KR pipes that were actually made back in the day. Big shout out to my friend Connor McElvain on helping me bend and weld those up. It was definitely a challenge. Working with the titanium was pretty intimidating, but the toughest part about it is just having the cleanliness for welding. The things that we welded on the exhaust were the bungs on the exhaust ports and the mounts on the pipes. But when you weld that titanium, you need the back shield and make sure that your material is very clean. The paint, I did all the body work, painting and wet sanding and buffing that out all myself. Does a good job complementing all the nickel finishes on the bike. Nothing's chrome on it, everything's nickel plated. Yeah, I really appreciate the help that I've gotten from Mike Lang, Dan Stack, Mike DeCleve, and most importantly, my wife for helping facilitate our life around building this bike for the past 9 months. I have a booth here. It's just LC Pojazdu. I sell some quick turn throttles and some t-shirts and hats, and stop by if you're interested. I got a big cartel that's listed underneath my Instagram. My name's Chris Milanowski. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and my Instagram is LC_Pojazdu. Thanks.
name's Nicole. I brought a 1998 Harley Sportster 883 chopper, and I'm from the Bay Area. I started painting in college. I moved across the country to California and I continued making art. I started just starting to paint my own tanks, and friends that trusted me gave me their tanks. And I think it's a lot like how tattooers are starting. They like need those subjects and people to trust them, so they'll like give them their skin and to practice. And that's kind of how I did it with my tanks, and people seemed to like how it was presented, and so I kept getting more work, and here I am. I don't know why, but for so long I've always wanted a peach bike, and a lot of the things that I paint on tanks are usually botanical images, flowers, fruits, snakes, birds. I just wanted something pretty. Like, there's so many bikes I've had over the years that are just supposed to be so tough and like rat bikes, or like I've been trying to get black, you know, black, 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 everything. And I think I just wanted to really lean into being girly and like lean into this softer side that I just always wanted. Figured out how to use metal flake as a paint and just painted layers of it on so that it looks like the cream comes out of the gasoline tank. It looks kind of like magic gasoline. So I don't have a spray gun. Like, I don't know how to airbrush. I don't know how to like, I'm not a professional automotive painter. I source out like the base coats and the clear coats to professionals. They spray it, and then I go and do my art on it, and then I give it back to them and they'll clear it. So in that process, I was communicating a lot with my clear coater, because I was just like, how do I use this metal flake? And I wanted it in like a really funky shape, and I mixed it with some kind of like a thicker medium, and I can't remember the name of it, but it became like this sort of like thick goopy paint. Painted 3 layers of it, and it was like probably like a quarter of an inch tall. So I wasn't sure how that was gonna work when I gave it to him, because you have to bury that in like tons of ceramic. And so he magically made it happen. I know he had it for like 2 weeks. He nailed it in terms of making it all smooth, you know. Amity and I met at Babes Right Out, hit it off immediately. We were having such a good time together, and you know, we kept in touch over the years. And at some point in 2019, I got hit by a car on my bike, so I was home. And so I was just had all this time to paint, and she was redoing and rebuilding her bike at the time. She gave me a couple of items that she wanted included, a buffalo, some sunflowers. She's from Kansas, and she kind of just let me have free reign. The trust that she, you know, gave me is like the most important thing, because like you'll always get the best work that way. I was jealous of all my girlfriends that had Sportsters, honestly. I just wanted one. I've always wanted one. Like, I've had several Harleys over the years. This is my 4th Harley. I've had all kinds of bikes. I also knew that it would force me to like learn more about working on bikes. I don't claim to have built the whole bike. Like, I've had so much help with it, but I've learned so much along the way. And as a result of owning a chopper, things are breaking, and I'm learning at like still learning. And it's frustrating, but it also is just it's so much fun to ride. A lot of people recommended it. Like and a couple of my girlfriends had used it. A couple of dude friends have used it too. And for that year, they just were like, this is exactly what you need to buy. And the look of it appealed to me like the most out of all the other ones I looked at. Like, it just felt like it kind of had that like old school look of like older Panheads and shovels, but it was still for a Sportster, and it just made the process so easy to be able to like cut and then put it on. That's what everybody was telling me was like the best way to do it. And so like, you know, I'm trusting like other people to like lead me in the right direction, and they did. I get so many compliments on it all the time. A lot of people think it's like an older bike, like they think it's from like the 70s. And that's like the effect, like to have like a modern Sportster with like an older feel, because it's got that throwback of like vintage choppers, you know. I hired Vicious Cycles, Frank, and I think he's based out of here in LA, but he makes a lot of resin caps. I hit up a couple other people, like, hey, can you help me like put candy in resin? And everybody was like, it's gonna melt, it's not gonna work. Frank took it up, and he was just like, we'll try. And he's like, hey, he made it work. So he's just like, I think there's like something about the specific temperature of the resin without like melting the candy, but like encasing it, like he worked his magic. So I'm just grateful he did, because he said he tried to like do candy, like gummy bears or something before, and they like melted inside. I don't know, he's a pro. Had Fish Newman help me out. He was instrumental in doing all the electrical, making sure everything was dialed in the right way so it was safe. Anthony Armaz, he's my clear coater. I also have my friend Ben Young. He helped me like bolt the engine in, like very basic things. Frank with Vicious Cycles with the gas cap. Gwen, who's Black Stitch Label out of Utah, she did the seat. Rob at SS Cycle hooked me up with an air filter that was a teardrop that matched it, that was good for the Bay Area. Probably like a year and a couple months from start to finish, from buying it to where it is now. Yeah. And I'm super grateful for all of that. I'm Chicken and a Biscuit on Instagram. You can also find that as my website, chickenandabiscuit.com. I paint tanks, helmets. I work at events. I'll be at Bibs Ride Out painting helmets, just flash. I do commissions. I'm Nicole Andrzejowskis. I'm from the Bay Area. My Instagram is Chicken and a Biscuit.
My name is Lee Wiedrich. I'm from Bismarck, North Dakota. I brought the 1965 Panhead, Highland Acre Shaker, kind of 60s inspired show bike. Oh, I nerd out on that like 60s style drag racing stuff. That's my favorite, like everything, like architecture, cars, bikes, like that's when they did it right to me. It was 1960s style. Drag bike inspired, but it's not like a hot dog engine or anything. It's pretty mild and just a big influence on the looks of it, I guess. A lot of the drag bikes back in the day would have like aluminum tanks, or, you know, weight reduction was the idea. And these ones I did out of mild steel so I could metal finish them. Wanted to make it look best I could and then chrome them. So fuel in each. Did the AN fittings for my oil lines, and then I wanted to incorporate that up there. So the crossover is an AN fitting. So this one doesn't have a petcock on it, but the left side does have a petcock. So this one crosses over, and then they share the same petcock to the carburetor. Yeah, oil and fender on this one, yeah. I didn't originally intend on doing it like that. I bought one of those, I think it was the 6-inch Manta Ray fenders, and I did that because I had the drag slick, so I was like, well, I'm gonna need a bigger fender, and then I got it, and I was like, well, it covered too much of the slick, and I didn't really like that, so I ended up shaving it down a lot, taking the edge of it out, but then I kind of took the radius of the fender, so I decided to do, I think it's the 4 3/4 one. So I ordered that, and then I ended up like molding that into my frame and my bike and everything. And I was sitting there one day, and I had no intentions of doing the oil and fender. I was gonna do like 2 like torpedo looking things that kind of match the tanks for the oil tank. I was sitting there just studying my bike one night when I was getting ready to shut down, and then I grabbed that first fender that I had all chopped up, and it fit like right in the inside of that original fender. And I was like, man, I'm like half the way there of doing the oil and fender. So I was like, well, I might as well just like push myself and try to do this. So the bottom is the feed, the middle is the return, which goes like, I don't know, probably most of the way up, and then the top one is the breather that comes all the way up almost to the filler cap. So it's set up like a normal oil tank would be, just, you know, you got tubes running internally to get everything up so it can breathe and do its thing. And yeah, it was my first time doing that. I didn't know what it would hold. I just like, I'm gonna do it and see what happens. And it holds like probably 2.5 quarts. So it's like pretty close to what a normal one would have. So a lot of extra work, a lot of welding. I mean, I have like 2.5 pounds of welding rod into all the molding on the bike and the metal shaping and all that. So there's a lot of welding, but I enjoy that. So bought the leg casting from Eric Espinoza. He sells parts online. Dave Polgreen chopped off the legs that were on it. It was extended back in the day, and I knew I wasn't going to use those. I took a piece of tubing and I kind of like, I pressed it and kind of sandwiched it, oval shaped it, and then I taper cut it so it like slashes down to meet. And I think it goes up into the casting, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 inches, and then it goes all the way down to the tubes to about the end of it. I was originally, since I did 2-inch over stock, I thought that, you know, it'd be kind of tall, so I was like, well, I'll rake it to compensate. But I liked how tight the front wheel was to the down tubes that I just decided, like, I'm gonna leave it like this. It looks real tight and nimble and kind of more racy and like circle track style that way. So when I deleted the perches for the springs, there's that spot where the springs would normally mount. I decided to bring that to a peak and just see if it would work. And I was able to like grind it out and save it all. So it looks kind of racy, like a little support beam there. And then the top tree is kind of like, idea is to match that too. I basically built the whole bike around that drag slick. I had that, and I sold all these parts to build my shop, but I kept that slick just because I thought it was so rad. And then once I did the Springer, I was sitting on this bike, and it's so nimble and clean. And once the headlight was off, like, you know, I shaved all the mounts for the headlights. I liked how you kind of just focused on the front end then. So I was like, oh, it'd be cool to like make the headlights, like if you look at it straight on, the headlights shine through the back leg of the Springer. Obviously, if you're gonna go at night and ride, you know, real far, it's probably not ideal, but for the show, I thought it like was the perfect idea. So I did the taillight to match. So like the fender peaks up, but then I put a circle in there. So the taillight, when you're like a car's distance away, the taillight is like right where it needs to be through that hole. So I don't know, like once I kind of get like an idea, I want to keep rolling with that and kind of make it all connect on the bike too. Oh, I have so many people that help me with this bike. I had so many talented friends. I think Pat, he rode to my house from Milwaukee right after I got invited to do this. And Pat, he hand paints tanks. Pat Boyle's on Instagram, but he hand paints like 60s, 70s style, like psychedelic skull, mushroom tanks, that kind of stuff. Well, he rode to my house, and I told him, I was like, Pat, I got invited to the show. I was like, would you pinstripe the bike? Knowing he's never pinstriped a bike before, but he was like, yep, I'm down. So he basically learned how to pinstripe for this bike. Pat helped me out a bunch there. Nate with the oil lines. My buddy Eric, grew up skateboarding with him. He did the video. Big thank you to Nate Schmidt at Sweet Avenue Fabrication. He helped me out so much. I mean, he's responsible for me being into a lot of this, learning how to TIG weld well, learning how to use a lathe. Andy Schmidt painted the bike, Nate's brother. Well, my dad did all the body work with me, kind of taught me how to do that. I wouldn't have done, we had probably 2 weeks into that, him and I just figuring it out together. And so really thankful for him helping me out there. Mike Stadoka, Avon, Minnesota. I took him this engine as soon as I found out I was going to be in the show, and he got on it and absolutely nailed it. It runs great. It looks great. That was killer. My wife, Rachel, she was super supportive through all this. Like, I hit her up first and I was like, I've been so busy the last 2 years with the shop, like maybe I shouldn't do this. She's like, you have to do this. So I'm glad she pushed me into this, like very stoked to do it. It's Vitsy Boys on Instagram. My buddy Cody, he does hog supply out here in California now. We started this with buddies back home, I don't know, probably over 10 years ago. 2016, 2017, it was just Cody and I on the page, like trying to get more serious about it, doing it as a business. He started making some parts and I was selling a lot of used parts on there. So we kind of started doing it full time. I worked at a brewery in Bismarck, but then on the side I slang a bunch of parts, and then Cody moved out here like 2017, 2018. I took the page over full time. So since 2017, I decided to make it my business, and I kind of jumped in head first and like started making more parts and then building bikes. I've built a couple customer bikes. I've built like quite a few bikes how I like them, and then I've got offered money for them, so I've sold them. And yeah, I'm Lee Wiedrich. I'm from Bismarck, North Dakota. I do Vitsy Boys. I'm Vitsy Fabrication on the website. Yeah.
This recap video is brought to you by Throttle Addiction. With thousands of chopper parts, a 90-day return policy, and free shipping on orders over $100, throttleaddiction.com is the best place to build your dream bike. Check out their selection of custom handlebars, fuel tanks, made in the USA hardtails, and so much more. For more than a decade, Throttle Addiction has been manufacturing and selling the best custom parts on the market. Build, customize, and ride. throttleaddiction.com.
My name is Ryan Cox. I live in Los Angeles, California. I built a 1940 80-inch UL or U flathead chopper. I have a 39 flathead that I've had for 6 or 7 years, and I built a bike with that, and I really fell in love with that platform for an engine. They work really well. They're easy to work on. They're pretty low maintenance. They make good power if you tune them right. And I like the way they look. To me, now they're my favorite Harley engine, the big twin flatheads. I really like them a lot. Yeah, I mean, I didn't do it myself. I paid the chromer to do it. He's a really amazing polisher, and they're cast cylinders, so they're very bumpy, and it was a lot of work. He was pretty bummed that I even asked him to do it. He said no at first, and I really had to kind of beg him to do it, and he said, it's gonna cost you. It did. But yeah, he went kind of wild, and I think he polished them for 4 days to get them really perfectly smooth. The fins are a little thinner now. It just looks really nice, and he did an amazing job with the nickel plating. And I feel like the color of the nickel goes well with the polished cases and heads. It came out nice. I'm kind of a stickler about the hardware I'll use. Something that would be period correct to a 60s style bike or early 70s even. I wanted everything to be shiny, so everything's either chrome or polished stainless. They're all, cut short, so there's no extra threads sticking out the backside. I think that's kind of standard issue for a show bike. You don't want anything extra there that doesn't have to be. My dad was a machinist in the military and then professionally for 40 some years. I guess maybe I inherited some of that from him. I'm not, crazy guy on the lathe, but I can get it done. If I have something I want to make, I can usually figure it out. My dad's always ridden and been into Harleys since long before I was alive. He's just a very mechanical guy. He's always had hot rods, Harleys. He's just a crafty human being, It's kind of the starting point of the entire build. I really wanted to do a bike with a 23-inch front wheel because you don't see them very often. And a lot of times when you do, it just doesn't look proportional. They look kind of weird if they're not if the rest of the bike's kind of not built to work with it. They look too big. I had a 2-over VL Springer that Jason Ferris had extended for me a few years back, and I felt like that would work well with the 23, kind of offset the size of the wheel so it looks proportional to the front end. And then I ran a really tall 19-inch rear wheel with a tall sidewall, just to kind of give it everything, just make everything flow together, so the wheel didn't look weird. This show is pretty competitive as far, not in like a competitive way per se, like I want to beat everybody, but you want to hold your own and do nice work and represent that you can, make something look nice. So I haven't been fabricating for a really, really long time. I'm newer to the fabrication world, and I wanted to make everything look really clean. So, the gas tank I made, I did twice. I started one and I wasn't really liking the way it was coming out, so I scrapped it. And I started over after having like 2 weeks into it, And the pipes, I went over them so many times just to make sure I had no lows. I filled everything and metal finished it multiple times just to make sure they looked perfect. And I know once you get chrome on something, if there's any imperfection, it's gonna show. So kind of had to be perfect. I've never made a gas tank before this one. Yeah, it was hard. I'm excited to do another one, especially from the trials and tribulations of doing this one. I learned a lot of things not to do the next time around. Yeah, it was hard, but it was also a learning experience, and I'm happy with how it ended up. One thing that stands out, the first time I ever started the bike, before I had tore it down to do paint and chrome, I wanted to ride it at least around the block just to say that I did it, say that I built it to the point where I could ride it before I tore it apart. So I got it started, and I had just built the bike for mock-up, so I didn't use Loctite and I didn't bend any of my lock tabs. And when the bike was running, a a nut that holds the brake linkage had rattled off and I didn't notice. And so I took off down the street and I went to stop and there was no brakes. And I didn't have a front brake hooked up yet. And yeah, there was 0 brakes. So it got a little hairy, you know. And the kill switch wasn't hooked up yet either. So I found myself trying to find a way to kill the bike and not crash and be able to stop all at the same time. And it was a little gnarly, but I managed to pull it off somehow. Joel from Butt Seats made the seat and pee pad for it. And it came out really nice, so thank you for that. My friend Mike Lykos helped me get the primary and clutch dialed in. Friend Dom came over a couple days and just helped hold things, you know, while I was filing or cutting or welding. My friend Dylan and my friend Jake kind of offered up some knowledge on some of the fabrication things that I did. Andy from Pangea Speed helped me out with some advice as well and some of his fabrication parts. Sonny Boy, so there's 2 guys. The paint was like a 3-person process. A guy named Walt from WW Custom Paint did the base coat and a lot of the prep work. And then Sonny Boy and myself kind of designed the layout of the gold striping on the bike, and then Sonny taped it out and sprayed it. I'm really happy with the paint. I think it came out really nice and clean, and they both did a really great job, and they were cool to work with. If anybody's interested in his shirt, you know, you can get them through my Instagram, Antihero1976. You'll see them on the post. Hit me up. If you have any questions about the bike, feel free to message me. My name's Ryan Cox. I'm from Los Angeles, California. My Instagram is Antihero1976. Yeah, I have a 1940 Flathead chopper in the show this year at Born Free 15.
My name is Neil Zarama. I'm based out of San Francisco, Aero Choppers, and I built a 1946 Knucklehead, and I call it the wagon burner. I'm a silversmith by trade. That's what I've been doing for a living for about 5-6 years. I think there's probably like 1,000 grams of sterling silver on it. So all the little details, the whirling logs and all that stuff, it's all silver. The only thing that's not silver is the big whirling log on the cover of the carburetor. Everything else is sterling silver, all the little details. There's a lot of Easter eggs on the bike. No, what I typically do, there's several different techniques. Sand casting, there's tufa casting, there's casting ingot and then stamping the work, file. I mean, I pretty much use all the old school native traditions in how to do silversmith work, and mostly work, actually 95% of the work I do is sterling silver. So. Traditionally, I'm Apache Chiricahua. Traditionally, Apaches were not silversmiths at all. Like the last frontier of folks that were fighting against the American Army, the US Army, were Chiricahua Apache, which is the clan band that my family is from. Apaches were not silversmiths, they were warriors. But the Dene are the Navajo, which are basically our cousins in language and in blood. They were the silversmiths, and that's still very much alive in Navajo country. All by myself, man. I live in San Francisco because that's where I was adopted at birth, so I didn't have the family and the traditions and all that until I was older. I do have a ton of Dene friends, Dene meaning Navajo, and they have taught me now a lot of the easier ways to do things. It took me about 3 years to figure out certain things, but I'm doing it now and I'm doing it the right way. So there's a few people that have done whirling logs, but they've stayed in Indian country. The whirling log was traditionally a part of Navajo, Hopi, Zuni, pretty much Lakotas, I think have pretty much every indigenous tribe in the US had whirling logs, and they became pop culture basically in the 1900s. Everybody had them. Coca-Cola used them, all of that until what happened in Germany and all that bad stuff. But to me, it's a traditional Native American symbol. And the meaning behind it for me is just, it's actually peace and love and, all that. So I know it sounds very hippie, but man, that's what it is. I was already going to build the bike, and I spoke to Mike and Grant, and what I was going to do was a crusty bike, which is not crusty, but just sort of put it together in a rideable bike. And when Mike and Grant said, yeah, let's get you in, immediately I was like, I've never built a show bike, and I'm not a fabricator in the sense of fabricating metal work and all that, but everyone around me has done this a million times. So what I farmed out, and I was part of the process of every single step of the bike. I guess the most challenging thing was to make a shiny bike and not drop it or ding it or something like that. To me, I don't know. It's just, it looks like me, it feels like me. I'm gonna ride the piss out of it after I'm done. After the show, I'm heading to New Mexico and Arizona. It's a chopper road trip, and that's what I'm gonna be riding. So, and then the bike is gonna show at La Fonda for Indian market too, so I'm stoked on that. My favorite thing about the bike, it's not really a story, it's bringing all the folks that I really, really treasure in this whole chopper thing. Jeff Montgomery, who did the motor, then I have Nathan Sykes, who did, everybody that I brought together to do little pieces. When I look at my bike, it's like I built it in terms of I'm the person with a name and all it, but everyone else had a part to do with it. So when they walk by it, they're like, I did that, and that's the way I think that's how it all should be done anyhow. We're all family and all that. Basically, I built a bike that I wanted to ride. And I've been riding that for, I guess, 2 years now since I built it. I probably put like 10,000 miles on it. With work and stuff, it's sometimes hard to get out. But the idea, I think that was the first bike that I thought, I'm gonna put this native thing into it. Like, what am I gonna do? So I started looking at old Navajo rugs. So I started thinking of these jagged edges of the 1930s rugs, and that kind of started it all. And my bikes are all probably gonna look that way. There's different colors, or a variation of, I've been into motorcycles since I was probably 10 years old. So, like I said, I was adopted at birth. My family that raised me are Colombian. We moved to Colombia when I was 8 years old in 1978, and I got into dirt biking there. And that basically sparked it. I've been on motorcycles since I was a little kid. Moved back to the US. I built my first chopper in 1988 in high school in my workshop class. And it was a little Triumph with a Knucklehead front end. I had no idea what the hell I was doing, obviously. I didn't even know it was a knuckle front end until years later. And that I've always rode bikes, and I started pretty much on Harleys exclusively probably like in 89, 90. So I've been doing that since high school, man. Yeah. So many people. I'm gonna forget all these people. Skins on Skins, Jeff Montgomery, Nathan Sykes. He's like, Sergi, who did the t-shirts and all that. Fab Work from Loomis. I mean, there's so many people. I'm gonna like forget all of them. I can't do it in front of a camera anyway. Oh yeah, Whirling Log and Arrow is actually my business in terms of silversmith, and so it's very much connected to Arrow choppers. Like Whirling Log and Arrow choppers are pretty much the same garage. It's out of my garage in San Francisco, and if you look at Whirling Log and Arrow, you're gonna see Arrow choppers there. It's all the same. Neil Zarama, Arrow choppers, Whirling Log and Arrow. You can find me on Instagram at Arrow choppers, or on Instagram for the jewelry at Whirling Log and Arrow. That's it.
My name is Matt Talajkowski. I run Sugar Baby Cycles. We're in Ben Lomond, California, which is roughly a couple hours south of San Francisco. We built a dual card Panhead this year for Born Free. Our front end is a full Indian replica that we made. Our frame is a heavily modified VL frame. It's a 51 Panhead motor with the intakes flipped, shortened linkers, the whole shebang. It's multiple pieces of a VL. You know, the VLs have all this very intricate casting work from the factory. We liked these details in the VL frame, but the shapes, getting the motor fit, getting the trans to fit wasn't really working for us. So it's got it's two up, a new backbone, the seat post tube and all the rear legs are done by us. And we modified the neck, but it kind of keeps, it's sort of an in-between of, you can still notice that there's VL components, but you can tell that it's no longer a traditional Harley frame. The front end is completely from scratch. We really wanted like an Indian kind of style girder. They're very rare, and I don't really know how people find them or afford them, and we kind of wanted to get one to study or maybe to extend, and it was way out of budget, so we decided to just kind of work from scratch. So the legs are, the only part that's not from scratch is the bottom of the legs are Ford radius rods from like a very early Ford models. They give us that tapered look, and the rest of it's all hand machined and made in our shop. You know, I'm not a big bike, like a themed bike guy. We build specific components, and then there's a natural end to those. So, you know, if you choose, oh, I want my seat to look this way, or I want my tank to look this way, like very simple components, you end up with having to make logical decisions all throughout the bike. So we have some visions, but not complete visions. The way we broke that rule on this bike was we kind of got a little drunk one night and we said, well, you know, what should we name the bike? And it started really looking very like bug-like to us, and so we kind of made a joke that it was going to be called Space Bugs from Outer Space. And the name stuck, and so we were kind of forced to make components that kind of fit with the name, which is helpful for kind of getting a bike to have a really cohesive look. I'm not big on naming, but it does help. So, you know, the front end, I was looking for ways to sort of accentuate, and we ended up making these kind of UFO disc kind of shaped pieces for the risers. Carbs are interesting because we don't actually have the original designs for the bike. You know, we do all the motor work and whatnot. So when we cut into the heads to take the carb from the right side of the motor and angle them to the left, the carbs, we wanted them to have an upwards angle and a forwards angle. And so the angle was high enough that essentially the fuel would pour out, like when you jump your bike on the ground, the fuel would pour out of the float bowl. And so we said, well, that's not gonna work. And the way that you get around that, especially in vintage, you know, flat track and like racing areas, is you essentially have a float bowl that is remote from the carb. And so your fuel level that sits inside your carb is determined in a different area of the bike. And so that gave us room. You still need to have something that supplies the fuel to the carb, and that gave us room to make another detail that was kind of like a UFO kind of disc shape. The whole vision is absolutely the hardest. I mean, you know, I've built more than a couple components or bikes where in my mind it looks great, and when I build it, there's a huge challenge. You know, I thought this is how it would look, but it doesn't. But in reality, for us, especially for professional metal workers and professional fabricators, I mean, getting the finish on the bike is super, super challenging. So just because you have the vision and everything else works, you do all the work and you're exhausted, and there is hundreds, if not 1,000 hours of metal finishing, chroming, prepping for chrome. You know, we were kind of under the assumption that you could just, you know, send parts out to be finished or chromed, and it's really not the case. I mean, if you want your work to be top tier, you need to do as much of the finishing work as yourself as you can. We have great chromers. There's people that are great at polishing, but if you want your bike to be at the top tier, you kind of have to be able to do it, at least some of it yourself. You know, everybody goes, oh wow, you got these remote floats, you've got this custom front end, but in reality, like the things that are super challenging to make a bike look cohesive is like, where do you put a fuel line? Or where do you put a spark plug wire? So it's, you know, we spend almost an equal amount of time just trying to have the bike have just like a very natural look, because you've got all these components, and I pay a lot of attention to the lines, and I mean, at least we try to, and then you kind of, then you stick like a fuel line or something, and for a bike like that, it doesn't complement. So we ended up running the throttle cables go through the gas tank, and that was a decision. Instead of like hiding components, like why don't we sort of accentuate them, which can be more difficult than hiding them. You know, I mean, you could have just tucked the gas line, you know, like behind the tank, or the throttle line behind the tank, and pretended it wasn't there. But you know, we try to say, well, hey, if there's time, let's try to make something that doesn't look nice. Either look nice or look like it belongs, you know? So there's a lot of details in the tanks that are mostly just trying to hide the fact that fuel lines and throttle lines are super ugly. It's a humbling moment because you kind of get into yourself, you get into your build, and you're feeling really good. And we were welding the exhaust, and we ended up with a piece of stainless welded into the exhaust that we weren't really aware of. And so you're on a timeline. I mean, we were stressed for 9 months, every day, every night. And then there's moments where like we sent the exhaust out to be chromed, and we have a timeline that we have to meet, and we had to remake the entire, every inch of the exhaust, and pay for the chrome twice. We had to take the front end back because we had made mistakes there as well. You know, they suck at the time, but then you sit down that night and you go, okay, this is good. I got a lot to learn, and I got a lot of stuff. You know, it's good for us. So I run Sugar Baby full time. My buddy Graham works with me full time. Sugar Baby was a joke for a long time. My wife was always very supportive. of our business, even before we really had a real business and I was living. I really hated my job. I was struggling, just working. I worked in a warehouse, I worked in kitchens, I worked in metal shops, and I wasn't happy. So I thought, well, let's take a chance. Let's start a business. And so we have a bunch of US made, mostly aluminum chopper parts. We do decorative work, we do functional work. But I think most importantly is there's just two of us. I mean, there's two of us. You know, we have a lifetime warranty on everything. I mean, it's just two guys. So if you have a product, you have a question, you have anything that you would ever need from us, if you buy a part and 3 years later you're having a problem with it, we'll be there and we'll back it. Yeah, one other guy. There's three of us, and this is actually a very prideful thing for us. Our buddy Drake, who does not work in the shop, he's an incredible fabricator, but he added some components on the bike, and he also painted it. And he's a mind-blowing, detail-oriented painter. So we take a lot of pride in the fact that this bike was fully built by the three of us, motor, transmission, all machining, all engine work, all paint. The bike never left the shop, and the only component that left the shop was the seat, which was done by Butts Seats, and it was done immaculately. So I highly recommend Butts Seats. My name is Matt Talajkowski. Our Instagram is Sugar Baby Cycles, all one word, and we're in Ben Lomond, California, if you ever want to stop by.
Hey, what's up? My name's Beav from Beav Spot. I'm located in Bellflower, California. This year at Born Free, I built a 73 cone shovel. For me, I'm a big FXR guy with a lot of chopper friends, so I kind of dip my head in both. So it's an OEM frame that my dear friend Slim Fab hardtailed and did a few other things like the dashboard he helped me with. And then I wanted a lot of FXR elements on it, so Wes at New Metal did the front wheel, which is insane. If you look at it, it's not a 19 OEM wheel, it's actually a 21 9-spoke that he hand milled out, manually milled out himself, and it's insane. You couldn't tell. This is the first bike I've ever had with a Morris Magneto, so it has a 5-speed, so there's no kicker. It's an Evo soft-tail transmission because I like Evos and 5 speeds and overdrive. So I just kind of like bikes that ride. I'm very in like just maintenance bikes. Like if you buy an old bike, preventative maintenance is key with me. Like you got to make sure you got a new charging system, new ignition system, new intake seals, all that stuff. So with my bike, if you look at a lot, it has a lot of OEM parts like a front end and 2000 up brake calipers. So I could go to any dealership and buy all that stuff in any town, in any state, you know? So the weird thing with me is I'm like electronic ignition guy. So like points is like a foreign thing. And then to have like a condenser and a coil in one little box, which was weird. And thankfully I have some great friends that are way smarter than me with these old bikes. So I got some good lessons out of it, that's for sure. So I'm stoked to ride it because a lot of people say there's not a lot of issues, but I kind of did the oxymoron because there's a starter on it. So literally the battery is only for the starter. So when I contacted Wes, I kind of was like slightly prepared, and I was very like, I just said, I know it's impossible to do, but like as OEM as possible. So I found an old PM 21 blank wheel, like a billet wheel that you would send to like a machine shop to get cut out. And then I gave him a 19 and I said, I just do what you would have to do. You know, like, unfortunately I didn't have any process in it. He had full range on it and he knocked it out of the park. It's nuts. And then my good friends Billy and Steg at STD made matching rotors and sprockets for him. So if you look at it, it kind of, you don't even see the rotor other than the circle, you know? So that's a pretty cool touch. So they're part, I think, of early Lendau, or they might still be part of Lendau rotors and brakes. So they had a relationship. So they kind of modified what they had, the programs for their CNCs, and catered to what I wanted with the one piece. And I got a killer polisher and he polished them in 12 hours and they're on my bike now, you know? So I am going to be making those as a production part, like this is probably gonna be like my third production part that I'm gonna make. So I have them at my booth here at Born Free, and I'll have them on my website and on my Instagram pretty soon for sale. We had a hiccup with the oil bag. I like textured silvered it with the primary cover, and it was the biggest eyesore on the bike. And I have an awesome neighbor in the front, my buddy John Paul Oates. He's a hot rod guy and he's got a paint booth in his shop. And I called the paint shop and got a pint of the blue, and he did it in like 36 hours. And we literally put the oil bag on the bike wet. Like, pretty sick. Yeah, because Tuesday I didn't have a tin set, and Wednesday at 2 o'clock my chromer dropped off my trees and lowers. And then Wednesday I worked 9 a.m. to 2:30 a.m. and was like, okay, Thursday I gotta be here for the meeting, and I didn't have front brake lines. So I was like, cool, I got a great brake line place down the street. So cool, I'm gonna wake up at 9, go to the brake line place. I woke up at noon and got the brake lines done, bled the brakes, and loaded it up and brought it here. This is a weird story. I kind of didn't want to mention something like this. I don't know if anybody follows me on Instagram, but I'm kind of like a sensitive, emo kind of dude. I'll say what's on my mind. In 2018, I lost my mom, and she passed at 73. And a month later, I found this 73 Shovelhead for 2,000 bucks. So I didn't have any plans with it, and I just put it on the back burner forever. And then when Grant came by and kind of put the flame under my butt to be like, hey, you want to do this little show I run? I thought it was the perfect opportunity to showcase my mom coming back to life. So she's in the grass. Big thanks to Slim Fab. Frank from Vicious Cycles Paint in LA did a crazy job on the paint. Wes from New Metal, Billy, Fast Ed helped me with the motor. Man, there were so many. Andy from Pangea Speed, Romero and JD Polishing. Two of my buddies from Australia came in the night before and we just cranked it out till 2:30 in the morning. So shout out to Maddie, Blank, and Chris Muma for just hanging out and eating burritos and drinking a lot of Dr. Pepper with me. Yeah, check it out. I make a lot of cool t-shirts. I make a little trinkets for FXRs, Mikuni choke brackets, Mikuni kickstand bumpers, and now I'm gonna be doing these 9-spoke rotors that will match a 9-spoke factory wheel. My name's Beav at Beav Spot in Bellflower, California, and you can find me on Instagram at Beav Spot with 2 S's. Thanks.